So I want to talk about, give a framework to our message. I just in July became Rabbi Emeritus, which means for the first time in 49 years, and I've been a solo all these years, I have not had 4 or 5 high holiday sermons hanging over my head to write during the summer. And so it's a feeling of relief, I got to tell you guys. So it's nice. Well, I want to share with you what I might have given if I were to give one and just give you an idea. But I want to begin by suggesting that we consider a number of questions when going into writing a high holiday sermon. And first would be, what do you think your congregation wants to know? What do you think they want to hear? Number two, and we'll take a moment just if you can give some thought to how you would answer this. Number two, what do you want them to know? And number three, what do you want to convey to your congregants? So again, the first question, what do you think they want to know or hear from you? And by the way, it doesn't necessarily have to be about Israel, but or those current issues. Number two, what do you want them to know, and what do you want to convey in that context? Anybody want to respond to any of those questions there? The first one about what do you think they want to hear, and then what do you think you would want to know? Please, Joel. Yeah. They want to know that we as a people are going to be open. Huh. Beautiful.
Whatever and all of this that includes, mindful that there's so much that we can't control, there's so much that could turn on a dime. I was speaking with Ephraim before. There are among the 101 Chatufim, 7 Americans, one of whom is from my shul, right? Omer Nutra, grew up at our shul. His parents are longtime members of our shul.
Sure.
And so we are in it as much as we possibly can be. Day after day, I'm on the phone and texting with his parents multiple times a day. So how do we get through it? Whatever we know, not mindful that life is such that in a moment things can change. And you can get a phone call, and therefore things are unpredictable. So how will we get through it?
Thank you. One other one, Ed, please.
I'm planning for Rosh Hashanah morning to basically take off a sermon that was given 100 years ago, the title by Israel Dresner, Steering or Drifting Which? But I'm going to talk about victimhood versus power from the point of view of the Jewish people. And I think part of what we're seeing is there's still discomfort with Jews having power. Even recently with Bowman's lack of election, do you say, look what the lobby did, or do we just keep quiet about it? There's a discomfort with power, and I want to explore that with the people because I think you'll probably agree, it really is hard having power, except there's one thing worse.
Not having power. And let me suggest, by the way, and I might mention to you when we spoke recently, Ruth Weiss's book, Jews in Power, which is just fantastic. So I just want to put out some of my thoughts about this as well. And that is, I think that I think too many of our colleagues don't realize or don't acknowledge that the purpose of your sermon, any sermon, but especially this year, should be to educate, to inform, to inspire, to uplift, to help them understand what they may not get from the media about Israel and its conflict with its neighbors. I'll show you an example or two right here from the Washington Post of last week. A massive Israeli raids kill at least 10. West Bank assault in its first phases was about what's happening in the West Bank. Very little context until all the way much later about all of the weapons that have been smuggled into the West Bank and the terrorist cells that are affiliated with Hamas that are in the West Bank. Another one, more IDF raids trap civilians in the West Bank. By the way, Washington Post has been especially horrendous. I think they're competing with the New York Times, and they may have even superseded it. But my point is that this is the source of people's news, as well as the CNN and other places. So I think it's important for us to try and bring that balance. As you know, some of you may know, and I included in there a couple of articles, a blog post that I had written about speaking about how we speak about Israel. But I think it's our position that critiques that are too harsh can cause people, I would say, to distance themselves, not just from Israel, but from Israel, first of all. But it doesn't stop there. It may lead ultimately to distancing from the Jewish people and ultimately from Judaism itself. So what do we achieve? I remember when I was growing up in the 60s, rabbis often used to give sermons bemoaning the fact that people would only come to shul to say Kaddish. And I'd like to say, guess what? They got their wish. People don't even come to say Kaddish anymore. So number two is nuance and subtlety is often not heard. There was a rabbi in Washington a few years ago who gave a very harsh critique of Bibi Netanyahu. There was some nuance in there that he was supportive of Israel and things like that, but people don't always hear all of that. You know, as we always say, there's the sermon you write, the sermon you deliver, the sermon people hear. Well, in this particular context there was a reporter from the New York Times, a columnist from the New York Times, who went and wrote and said, my rabbi is such a Zionist, but and then it went blasting Israel. And the nuance, the subtlety wasn't in there. Finally, I want to suggest and say something very important, and that is that for those rabbis who get up and feel the compulsion, and in some respects I feel I'm speaking to the choir here, but it's important. We are recording this session here, and that is we should be guided by the principles, Jewish principles. One of the major ones is the whole concept of tochacha. What do we learn about tochacha? How are you supposed to do it? Not publicly, but you do it privately. And I feel that when we are making those public critiques, public criticisms, we in fact are not following the ethos of what Judaism teaches us. And so, as I've said, our criticisms of Israel dare not be louder than our expressions of love. So we need to deliver a message that they won't hear elsewhere. And as along the lines of what Joel was saying, I think it's important for us to make sure that people leave feeling good about being Jewish, feeling good about the Jewish religion, feeling good about the Jewish people and the Jewish nation, and that they want to be a part of it. Not that they say, what the hell am I doing here? So just as we rabbis are advocates of mitzvot, of living Jewishly, whatever movement we may be associated with, we should also be advocates of Israel and of the Jewish people. A number of years ago, I opened a high holiday sermon and I said the following. I said, I'm not going to speak about politics tonight. There's a whole controversy of whether or not rabbis should speak about politics. I said, I'm not going to speak about politics. I'm going to talk about why we need to support Israel and put it in that context. In other words, that it should be seen as a non-political issue. And that right there, by the way, can be an opening to use. Because I seek in my high holiday sermons to help people understand the complexity of the conflict, the challenges facing Israel, as I said, the nuance that's so often overlooked. And this year of all years, we have that extra responsibility. This has been, for most of us, all of us, you know, probably the most difficult year to have to live through. There was 9/11, and that presented its own challenges. But this is different in terms of the assault upon us in so many different ways. Our young people are confronting barriers and checkpoints. Now, colleges just started, resumed their fall semesters, and on their campuses, kids are being forced to go around or to be prevented from going to parts of campus unless they profess their denunciation of Israel, the rejection of Zionism. The anti-Israel fanatics demand that Jews relinquish basic tenets of what it means to be a Jew, as well as their dignity and the solidarity that sustains us. So I think that we have a very a crucial role to play, and the potential is there. And what I want to suggest is we have to change the narrative. We rabbis must speak vociferously about the situation in a way in which we change the narrative and don't leave it just to the demonstrators in the college campuses. And there are tens and hundreds of thousands of people out demonstrating, whether it's here or the capitals of Europe. And that's what's getting the headlines, and that's confusing our people. And I think they need to be reassured. There's a concerted, organized effort. Let's recognize it for what it is, to demonize and to delegitimize Israel. And so at this time, our people are looking for leadership, for guidance, for ammunition to be able to respond to this. So we have an obligation to challenge the notion that Israel is the aggressor, to remind people of who it was that broke the ceasefire on October 7th, of who it is that is the initiator of the violence, and who it is that actually pulled the trigger that killed those 6 innocent, brave, wonderful, beautiful nefashot just last week. Unfortunately, people don't always remember these things, but the high holidays will already be a month from now. People have a short memory. I once heard someone say that for Americans, history is what you had for breakfast. So the memory of October 7th, for some people, has faded. We need to replace that and to remind people, because it's been replaced by images of Israel as the aggressor. I want to share with you a quote that captures the essence of Israel's dilemma. Some of you may remember Geula Cohen. She was a member of the Likud and of Knesset. She was the mother of Tzachi Hanegbi. I recently saw Tzachi Hanegbi and asked if the story that I heard was true, and he said it was. And it goes like this. He was serving in the Lebanon War in the 1980s. And his mother was asked, as she was a member of the government, what she would do if her son were kidnapped or captured by the Lebanese forces. And she said, if my son was captured by the Lebanese forces, I would be standing outside of the Knesset and I would be demanding that the government must do everything possible in order to secure his release. She said, then I would go in and take my place at the table in the government and I would say, don't listen to those people outside. And that indeed, I think, captures so much of the dilemma that Israel faces and what it is in terms of the challenge of the different aspects of the choices it must make. So you may want to address anti-Semitism. Pam, come on up here. There's a folder right here for you. You may want to address obviously aspects of anti-Semitism because of all the anti-Semitism that's going on. I thought it was very important to add when I found out that Michal Kotler-Wunsch would be here. She's amazing as Israel's envoy combating anti-Semitism. You may want to. So what I want to do is conclude with an outline of what we learned in rabbinical school, the classic 3-point sermon. It's always a good go-to, which may be helpful. And my suggestion, and then afterwards we can share some other ideas until Erica gets here. And my suggestion is that the sermon, Paul, that I would have given if were I to give one. What have we learned since October 7th about the world, about Israel, and about us? The world. First, I think one of the things we talk, and within there are actually three sub points actually. First, our enemies. And that would be that they really do mean what they say. I don't intend to give you the whole sermon, just to give you some thoughts and suggestions. They really do mean what they say. What was it? They really do mean what they say. Then I have to write it, by the way. They really do mean what they say, and they really do want to wipe out Israel and eradicate not just Israel, but Jews, and not just Jews. After Saturday comes Sunday. The Islamic fundamentalists, and it's important, obviously, to distinguish and recognize the fact that there's a distinction between the adherents to the to the Islamic religion and the Islamic fundamentalist fanatics who do seek to destroy Israel and so on. A second point would be obviously the moral bankruptcy of the world, the lack of a response. You know, some of you may have heard there was. It's amazing. Just last week there was a week and a half ago, a United Nations exhibit here in New York at the United Nations, victims of terrorism. There was not a single victim of Arab terrorism. Not a single Israeli was included in that whole exhibit there. Gilad Erdan, the now former ambassador of to the United Nations, did a wonderful video going through and showing it. I mean, it was just amazing. So the moral bankruptcy of the world, I think, is an important point to bring out. Yeah, just yesterday became head of Magen David Adom. One could talk about the naivety of people within the context of not those who are out demonstrating for Hamas, those who have pulled down the posters of people being kidnapped, what that means, what we're up against, and of course to remind people. I think it's important that Iran is behind all that is happening. Second, Israel. I have to tell you, I wrote these remarks before this past weekend. I'd love to ask if you think they're still relevant and if you think how they can be delivered. What I wrote was, and because I've been there twice since October 7th, once with the ZRC with a fantastic mission. And by the way, if you ever have a chance to come on one of our missions, please do. They've been unbelievable. Remarkable. So the remarkable story of resilience. That despite all that happened, you know, the fact that people got up and they realized they had no alternative, the volunteerism, the sense of, you know, the way people are responding. I wanted to talk also about Jewish unity, which is a little bit more difficult to talk about after this past week with all those demonstrations. But any of you, and it sounds like some of you have been to Israel, you know, the signs Yachad Ninatzeach, which I translate as not just together we will win, but I translate as together we will prevail. Because Linatzeach really means more than just winning. It means together we will prevail. And so that importance of unity despite the divisions over judicial reform, which, in an instant, just all dissipated. There were the wonderful pictures of religious soldiers, not too religious, but religious soldiers with secular and people who were in favor, and all that was put aside. The IDF has been amazing. Say what you will, but it has truly been, the way they've been able to fight this war is remarkable. And there again, getting back to what I said at the outset, it's important to get the right information out there. I'm sure many of you know the ratio of combatants to civilians is the lowest in history ever. And when I just heard a member of Congress, Debbie Dingell, I'm going to call her office, say on Sunday news program, there are 40,000 innocent Palestinian civilians. Number one, of course, as we know, it's the Hamas figure. And by the way, if anybody wants to know whether or not those figures are legitimate, Lisa's very modest, but her husband, Gabi, what does he go by? Adi. No, what is his writing? So Abraham Weiner wrote this wonderful piece, that's her husband, in Tablet magazine, disputing and showing the fallaciousness of the Hamas numbers. But let's just say it's true. 18,000 are terrorists. There are there've got to be at least a couple of thousand people just die of natural death. So that leaves about 20,000 by their own figures who have died, which would mean that it's the lowest ratio in history of civilians to combatants in warfare. I think also, by the way, one thing you may want to talk about is that the rescue operations performed by the IDF, where these soldiers have risked their lives, reflect Jewish values, because of the fact that they are willing to go in and that again, that go back to the Geula Cohen, and that would be a great story to add as well. The tension that exists there between trying to save lives and the hostages and things like that. Brett Stevens apparently wrote a column in today's New York Times that was I would recommend about this issue as well. To what extent one should go for this issue. So anyway, there are aspects you may want to talk about other things in terms of what Israel is doing, the volunteerism or the response or things like that, or however you want to deal with that. And then finally, I think a third point about us, about the Jewish people, that we, most of us understand and side with Israel, but not all. And maybe to explain a little bit as to why they are outside of the norm. And in that context, I want to share with you this wonderful quote that I came across. I don't remember where I found it. Have any of you ever heard of this? By the Hebrew poet Natan Alterman. Natan Alterman wrote a poem, and it's called "Then Did Satan Say." It's very, very applicable. It goes like this. Then did Satan say, "How will I conquer this beleaguered one? How will I best him? He possesses courage, ingenuity, and tools of war." And then he said, "I'll neither rob his strength nor bridle him, nor rein him in, nor plant fear in his heart, nor enervate his mind. But this I'll do. I'll blight his mind till he forgets his cause is just." And that is, I think, I've used that. It's a very powerful. I'll say it one more time. Then did Satan say, "How will I conquer this beleaguered one? How will I best him? He possesses courage, ingenuity, and tools of war." And then he said, "I'll neither rob his strength nor bridle him, nor rein him in, nor plant fear in his heart, nor enervate, enervate, enervate his mind. But this I'll do. I'll blight his mind until he forgets his cause is just." And so it's a chance to remind people that our cause is just. And as I said, to leave people inspired, uplifted, feeling that, as Joel said so beautifully, that we're going to be okay, that we're going to survive.